Hour number one in full effect right here on the early line, Sirius XM channel 159, SportsGrid Network. Davis and Donnie here in the morning, breaking down some NBA action. It was big action last night. A doubleheader again in the play-in tournament. Let's see it. The Philadelphia 76ers 105, the Miami Heat 104. Now, before we get to the game here, Davis, we talked about yesterday. You were so dead on because we talked about the total itself. Forget about the -5.5 for the Sixers, which the Heat covered in that game. But the total in this game closed right around 208 to 208.5. Look at that final score, 209. It was a dead under at the half. I was like, man, that is maybe the easiest play you're going to get. Neither one of these teams is going to reach 100 points. And then you watch that fourth quarter, which finished 36 to 30 in favor of Philadelphia. And the late three ball that goes down basically with 0.3 seconds on the clock to hit that total. That had to be a tough scene because that under was a stone cold under last night, Davis.
I mean, that we knew this was going to be a rock fight. We knew both teams were going to want to slow it down. The Heat end up with 13 turnovers and the 76ers with 15 in a pretty slow-paced game. I mean, that tells you exactly what you need to know, which was neither of these teams wanted to give anyone space to breathe. The 76ers had no room on offense. They scored 22 points in the first quarter, 17 points in the second quarter. Then they double up with 30 and 36 in the second half. But it's pretty clear that the Heat defense was it was a lot for the Philadelphia 76ers offense to handle. And Embiid, Embiid was good in this game, but 23 points is like well below his seasonal average. So that's really, I guess, would be the indicator. Now he did, as predicted on the show yesterday, just crushed his rebounding prop because they were like, Bam, you got to stick to him like glue. You gotta get in between him and the basket, but that left him out of position for the rebounds because he just Bam Adebayo's whole focus from the time he woke up yesterday to the time he went to bed was, I have to stop Joel Embiid from putting the ball in the basket. I don't care if he grabs it off the basket when someone misses, but he is not putting the ball in the basket.
And you saw the game early, too. The Sixers jump out to a lead. Bam Adebayo gets 2 quick fouls here. Joel Embiid's been known to get people in foul trouble. It's like, oh, this could be an easy game for the Sixers because we know how hard typically in that half-court game for the Miami Heat to score. It's not, an easy task here. But you saw going forward, they come up with that matchup zone. The Sixers couldn't hit water out. And quite frankly, the Miami Heat from three-point range early couldn't either. The second half, both of the sides started to heat up. But I thought it was interesting, and this is what we get out of SportsGrid because the thought process early in that first half was once the Miami Heat took control, it's like, wow, man. Spo just came up with a defensive concept. The Sixers can't get their way out of it, but Nick Nurse and the Sixers went into halftime, changed up that game plan, scored 30 points in the third quarter and 36 points in the fourth quarter. If we're taking a look at the Philadelphia 76ers, we thought you would be leaning on Tyrese Maxey, who wasn't bad last night, scored 19 points. But how about Nick Batum off the bench, 6 of 10 from three-point range? If Nick Batum doesn't come off the bench and drop three-point shot after three-point shot in that third quarter to get him back into the basketball game, I don't know where the Sixers end up. So it was Batum and Embiid as that 1-2 punch that nobody really saw coming last night.
I thought that was a pretty good adjustment from Nurse because what he saw was their normal offense with Maxey, the two-man game with Maxey and Embiid. They were not getting their space. Maxey actually was pretty uniquely affected by the rule change that Adam Silver wouldn't admit existed and then did admit existed recently, which was they started calling fouls in the lane a little bit differently. Like basically they gave primary ball handlers like Luka, like Halliburton, like Maxey, less leeway to draw foul calls in the lane. And Maxey, was pretty impacted by that in this game. Maxey only got to the line 3 times, which is like well below what you would have expected from him in this game. And if you look at who was taking the 3-point shots for the 76ers in the second half, it all tilted towards the wings. It tilted towards the guys in the center, which was a natural impact of not only Maxey's gravity, but Embiid's. Because if your whole focus is we got to double Embiid when he gets the ball, we got to stop Embiid from scoring, it means that a Buddy Hield is going to be open. It means that a Nick Batum is going to be able to get some shots up off the bench. And you want to talk about wins for the Philadelphia 76ers. How about Embiid plays 38 minutes, Paul Reed plays 10. So you do the math there. That means there was 10 minutes where Reed was the center and Embiid was not. Paul Reed wins those minutes. I don't ever remember a 76ers playoff game, and I bet you don't either, where the 76ers found the way to win the non-Embiid minutes. If they can do that in whatever playoff series they have the rest of the way, and not even win, If Paul Reed for the rest of the playoffs can be like minus 2.5 per 100 possessions, 76ers might win the championship because that's how good I think Embiid is. But the Embiid on-off numbers historically in the playoffs, Donnie, it's like Wilt comes off the floor and then I go in to play center is what the numbers have been historically with Embiid off the floor for the 76ers. So good on B-ball Paul here.
Yeah, by the way, that's also a reflection of the coaching staff as well, because the problem in Philadelphia for the past couple of years was the rotations were such an issue under Doc. You're right about that. Hey, look at that. Things are going good. Let's get Embiid a rest. Oh, look, now we're losing the basketball game. You got to bring your starters back in. It was always that seesaw battle with Doc Rivers, which, again, didn't happen last night. And I guarantee you right now, Doc Rivers led Philadelphia 76ers team down double digits to the Miami Heat at the half. That game probably ends up a 20-point victory for the Miami Heat, but also making those adjustments, knocking down three-point shots, those are key. Let's focus on the Miami Heat because their season isn't over yet. They still have another chance to advance. They're going to be a home game on Friday as they take on the Chicago Bulls, but some bigger issues are popping up, and that's Jimmy Butler, who started that game very well but gets banged up at the end of the first quarter. He wasn't right the rest of the way. 5 of 18 from the floor, gutted it out and still played 40 minutes in that game, scored 19 points. But after the game in the post-game press conference here, Davis, he was talking about his knee saying, I know something isn't right. An MRI is on the way. It could be an MCL issue. That's bad news for a playoff Jimmy Butler in the Heat.
I mean, sure, it's bad news. Does any person on earth believe that Jimmy Butler will not be playing in this play-in game? I mean, not one. Jimmy Butler doesn't believe it. I don't believe it. The person who hates Jimmy Butler the most on earth doesn't believe it, and he probably will find a way to gut out, 24 points, no turnovers, 6 assists, 7 rebounds, and I did want to mention another. I was just spot on with this game because another thing I said yesterday was, I bet Tyler Hero is going to have to be the primary creator here because the 76ers game plan is going to be, we can't let playoff Jimmy, just basically victimize us in this game. And they didn't. Butler took 18 shots in this game, only made 5, only got to the free throw line 4 times. How about 14 3-point shots for Tyler Hero? Now, he did have more points than shots, but in a low-scoring game, you just kind of need someone to stir the drink of the offense, which is what Tyler does very well.
What was interesting, too, is obviously we knew there was a couple key injuries where Rozier was never going to play, but we got the upgrades in the afternoon for Duncan Robinson and said, you know what? That could be a guy to focus on that can give you a little bit at least extra scoring to open up the lanes there. He ends up not playing in that basketball game. Maybe he'll be ready for the next time they turn it on Friday night. But it was an interesting game all the way through. The Miami Heat, again, not advancing. The Philadelphia 76ers do advance, which means they are going to take on the New York Knicks, so set up for a monster series. That is going to get underway on Saturday. And by the way, Davis, Saturday, 4 games in the NBA spread out across the day. No game starting later than 8:30 p.m. How could we do this? We're supposed to start 3 of those games at 10 o'clock or later, Davis. What's going on in the NBA?
It's not what I want. I'm loving this.
No, you want it.
You want it. You know how many times in my life I've had to miss a playoff game, or how many times in my life have I watched a regular season Golden State Warriors game, Donnie? I mean, truly, I bet less. Even in that crazy run when the Warriors were must-see TV, I mean, I bet I was watching 10% of the available Golden State Warriors regular season games, because I'm not staying up until 12:30 at night to finish a Curry game. It's just not going to happen for me.
By the way, it's a great point you bring up because I used to have these arguments saying, can you imagine if the Golden State Warriors in their dynasty were actually the New York Knicks and playing in Madison Square Garden, how big that would be? Or quite frankly, what happens if Michael Jordan was a Golden State Warrior back in the day and we never got to watch him play? Crazy times here, but I always like to say this and keep it simple. Put games on where everybody can watch. The ratings will get higher. It's a no-brainer. Saturday, we're doing that, people. Spread the games out. Let's watch it. Let's love it. It's NBA action. We're going to the Windy City next, right here on the Early Line. Let's continue here in the association on the Early Line for a Thursday morning. And last night, we had an elimination game. Not in Philadelphia, because the loser, the Miami Heat, still has another chance to shine on Friday night back at home to try to advance and punch their ticket as the 8th seed. But the Chicago Bulls and the Atlanta Hawks last night, the loser loser was going home. And by the way, Trae Young, pretty good in this play-in tournament, unbeaten here. That's not the case anymore. He does have a loss. Why? Because the Chicago Bulls pulled off the victory, 131-116 easily, covering the three-point spread as favorites. The total going way over the total. And if we're looking at this game overall, sometimes it's so simple. Win the three-point line, win the battle. 29% from the three-point line for the Atlanta Hawks. How about this? 42% from the three-point line for the Chicago Bulls. The starters were blasting off. How about Kobe White? 42 points in an elimination game last night for the Bulls. They were just too much for the Atlanta Hawks last night, Davis.
They were. I mean, I'm going to go ahead and guess that the Bulls have never lost a game that Kobe White has scored 40 points in. I mean, I'll need to get our stats and information team to research that for me, but I'm just going to go ahead and guess that that is true. And I mean, look, we were pretty confident that this game was going to go over the total. It was not going to be a big defensive battle. It was not a big defensive battle. The Hawks are, man, how many days now before we get the Trae Young trade? Is the Trae Young trade happening before the draft? Like, Trae Young is so out of there, man. I gave out the theoretical play on the show yesterday, 19 and a half field goal attempts for Trae Young. Didn't even get close. He let DeJounte Murray do it in the biggest game of the season. How about this? In the biggest game of the season, Trae Young got outshot by Clint frickin' Capella. 15 field goal attempts for Capella, 12 for Trae Young. Not exactly the most will to win from my University of Oklahoma compadre, Trae Young. I think he's gonna. I just brainstormed him. How about Trae Young and Steph Curry in the backcourt for the Golden State Warriors? Trae Young gets to play with his hero Steph Curry. I just workshopped that one, and I love it.
The Mighty Mites in the backcourt, man. Talk about a lot of point guards backing them down, trying to score some easy points. But having said that, you look at Trae Young, and you're right about that. 11 of 13 from the free throw line, so he was getting there, but he finishes that game in a minus 27, worst on that team. And I always go back to, if we remember on draft night, Davis, everybody got their way. We're happy with Luka Doncic in Dallas. You're happy with Trae Young over there in Atlanta. Imagine role reversal in that aspect here, because there are going to be those questions that come up. But if we're looking at the starting lineup here, the Chicago Bulls gave you a lot. DeRozan, 22 points. Vucevic, 24. White had 42 points. DeSumo had 19. Caruso just chipping in there. Only 2 of 3 from the field in 17 minutes with 6 points. But it looked like it was going to be a blowout from the jump. First quarter here, Chicago Bulls 40, the Atlanta Hawks 22. But they role reversed in that second quarter, which is so NBA-like, where they scored 22 in the first quarter. How about 45 in the second quarter? Got themselves back in, but it was another big third quarter by the Chicago Bulls to put them away. I don't know if we were surprised in this game, because it was the later game, and whoever wins this probably going to lose the next game anyway. But impressive performance from the Bulls, and I was talking about it earlier yesterday, Davis. The way that the Atlanta Hawks ended the season, playing no defense and getting blasted, and the Bulls going into Madison Square Garden and taking the New York Knicks to overtime in a game that the Knicks needed to win, I thought that would show up a little bit here in a 15-point win by the Chicago Bulls. They played good basketball last night.
They did. I mean, look, this I have trouble with this, because you and I both know this game doesn't matter. And the thing that I would be the thing that I would be scared of or hesitant of as someone who wanted the Bulls to do well is, I don't want there to be any positive reinforcement to the front office for Chicago that, like, oh, this group of guys, yeah, let's build around, DeMar DeRozan's contract is up at the end of this season. They'll have to make a decision on that. And I fear that they're just going to continually be this play-in team, this 7, 8, 9, 10 seed in the Eastern Conference. They have no willingness to redo the button, to press the rebuild button. Patrick Williams has not been available because he had to have surgery on his left foot. I think they actually have found something in Ayo Dosunmu. Dosunmu is going to be a really good sixth guard or third guard, sixth man in the NBA for a long time, kind of in a Patrick Beverley style way, where, like, if he's your starting point guard, starting off guard, you're probably not winning 50 games, but if he's your guard coming off the bench, you're probably a pretty good team. But we have enough evidence now, and I know I'm talking about them just winning this game, but we've got enough evidence now that the DeRozan Vucevic front court is just gonna be so brutal defensively, because Vooch is not going to protect the rim. And DeRozan is not athletic enough to make up for that. So you just have these two guys at the two most important defensive positions that are just bad defenders. And so it doesn't matter that Caruso and White and DeSumo and Patrick Williams, when he's available, are all good defensive players, because there's only so much you can do defending the perimeter. This is why people are already picking against Oklahoma City, Donnie. People are already saying, oh, Oklahoma City, they're going to lose to the Lakers, they're going to lose to the Nuggets, they're going to lose to whoever they play because they don't have a center. Chet is he's a good defensive player, but he's not like a Brook Lopez style eraser of space around the rim. It's just not really what he does. And the Bulls have that problem like super exacerbated. I don't know. I mean, is there any team that is less fun to talk about in the National Basketball Association than these two teams who like happen to play each other in this playing game? It's nuts.
Yeah, a different feel for sure in the Western Conference, where we had that excitement for the 9-10 play and to see who was going to advance and who was going to go home. Not necessarily the same type of atmosphere in Chicago, but the Bulls do win. And the reason being for that, the Atlanta Hawks entered this game 36-46 on the season. The Chicago Bulls at 39-43. So we know you can score points on the Atlanta Hawks. And the Chicago Bulls last night were game for that effort, as we said, easily going over the total. The line didn't move much from that opening line at the FanDuel Sportsbook, which was 3 points, basically closing at 3 points. You saw maybe an even betting strategy. Maybe the Hawks can come up big. We know Trae Young has played extremely well in these rounds, but it didn't work out. So now as we move forward, we're going to get a Friday night game where the Chicago Bulls were home court advantage in round number 1 here. Now have to go down and take on the Miami Heat. And as we know, the Heat aren't going to say, awesome, man, you guys want to score? We'll score with you as well. The Chicago Bulls advancing against the Miami Heat, playing just a different brand of basketball where you can score against the Hawks, maybe not so much against the Heat. How do we think they match up on Friday night?
I mean, if Jimmy Butler's actually not able to play, I actually can see worlds where the Bulls win this game because, the Bulls can score. I mean, we've seen it. We saw it last night. Like, the Bulls can get to 110 points, 115 points, even against a really good defense, whereas the Heat, without Jimmy, it is going to be an absolute grind. Now, maybe Rozier is able to play in that game. Caruso and Tyler Hierro. I do not love that for the Miami Heat because Tyler is more of like he's more of an agility style. He's a finesse player, right? He's not putting his shoulder into you to get through the screen. He kind of needs his space to do what he does on offense. It would be very funny. Things like this never happen in the NBA. It's actually, we're going to talk about this in Fade the Public, but it's one of the things people don't like about the NBA playoffs is that there are not really upsets. There are not really surprises. When there is an upset in the NBA playoffs, people talk about it forever. We still talk about the We Believe Warriors beating the Mavericks because you just never see upsets like that, the way that the NBA playoffs are structured. The Bulls beating the Heat, you would be hard-pressed to find one person not located in the city of Chicago who thinks that the Bulls are going to end up winning that game, or honestly even wants them to win that game, because people do, and I'm including myself in this, people love the Heat culture and Spoelstra and Udonis Haslem's waving the towel on the bench. People have just kind of bought into this Miami Heat thing. Like, oh, it doesn't matter if we win 44 games in the regular season. We'll get to the postseason and we think that we can beat anyone. And losing the freaking 9-7 play-in game to the Chicago Bulls would be so against that honestly, I kind of want it to happen just because it would be so funny.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. But also, you take a look at Eric Spoelstra being a great coach here, trying to limit the damage and slow the game down. Kobe White had 43 minutes played last night, 15 of 21 from the field, which included 9 of 10 from the free throw line and 42 points. He's only averaging 19 points per game, basically doubled that plus. If you are Eric Spoelstra entering into this basketball game and you say maybe Jimmy Butler is banged up, how do you play this game out? And more importantly, who are you stopping on the Chicago Bulls? Who's the guy that you're like, you know what? This guy isn't going to beat us.
I mean, I think it would be DeRozan. DeRozan would be the one you'd be worried about just being like, that guy's getting 37 points in an elimination game. I know it was Kobe White in the first game, but DeRozan, DeRozan is sort of the platonic ideal of a bucket getter. Like, DeMar DeRozan was put on this earth to do one thing, and it was to score points in a basketball game from 17 feet away from the bucket. I think Spoelstra's plan would be not that dissimilar to what they did in the first game, which is Tyler Hero is going to be the primary creator on offense. You're going to put him in tons of pick and rolls. I wonder if they go a little bit heavier on Nikola Jovic than they did in the first game in terms of his offensive involvement. He just has been forgotten in this whole shuffle of the Heat, but his development as a player has been pretty big for them, just as a power forward with a little bit of oomph instead of these, Caleb Martin, Haywood Highsmith guys who are just like good defenders and they can stand in the corner and shoot threes, but Jovic can actually put the ball on the floor a little bit. Should be pretty clear. I just love Tyler Hero. I've got the Tyler Hero cereal box here behind me in my set. Like I'm a big Tyler Hero guy, and I would kind of love for him to have another moment like he had in the COVID NBA Finals.
They need a hero. Certainly they do, and specifically of Jimmy Butler, who has a key MRI coming today that will let us know the damage of the knee, which we believe is an MCL. Hobbled off the court last night in Philadelphia, but keep in mind, looked like he might be leaving in the first quarter, ends up playing all the way through and playing 40 minutes in that game. Playoff Jimmy will be available on Friday. We'll find out.